The bet that the 2015 Iran nuclear deal would increase Middle East stability was a bad one for America, for Europe, for the Middle East and indeed for the entire world, Pompeo said during his first major speech in his new role, promising that the new deal would address not only the Islamic Republic's nuclear program but also its ballistic missile program, its interventions in Syria, Yemen and Lebanon, and its repressive treatment of its own people. We will track down Iranian operatives and their Hezbollah proxies operating around the world and crush them, Pompeo added, referring to the Lebanese armed group that is Iran's chief ally in the region. Iran will never again have carte blanche to dominate the Middle East. But the secretary offered few clues about how Washington might convince Tehran to sign on to a tougher accord. Pompeo's chief proposal, fresh sanctions that would force the Iranians to negotiate, depends on cooperation from Russia, China, and Europe, which, unlike the US, do significant business with Iran. Obama administration officials spent years building a sanctions framework with those governments before attempting the nuclear diplomacy. Pompeo repeatedly blasted President Barack Obama's team as naive and even once suggested they actually sought to help the Iranian government. But it's unclear how the Trump administration believes it will prove more successful than its predecessor in bringing aboard other international powers. Since Trump announced the U.S. withdrawal from the deal, the other countries involved in it have scrambled to ensure that Iran continues receiving economic benefits so that it will continue upholding its end of the deal, which they say is essential to global security. The EU, the closest American partner in diplomacy with Iran, has been unusually blunt in recent days. Looking at latest decisions of @real Donald Trump, someone could even think, with friends like that who needs enemies, Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council, tweeted last week. Pompeo attempted to downplay the rift. From my conversations with Europeans friends, I know that they broadly share these same views, of what the Iranian regime must do to gain acceptance in the international community, he said. Hours after Pompeo's remarks, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini reaffirmed the EU's commitment to the 2015 nuclear deal. There is no alternative to the JCPOA, Mogherini said in a statement, referring to the Iran deal's official name, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Secretary Pompeo's speech has not demonstrated how walking away from the JCPOA has made or will make the region safer from the threat of nuclear proliferation or how it puts us in a better position to influence Iran's conduct in areas outside the scope of JCPOA. Pompeo, like hawkish National Security Advisor John Bolton, has warned that the Trump administration would be willing to punish European businesses dealing with Iran. But it's unclear how far Gulf countries will go to pressure the Islamic Republic, particularly if Europe, Russia, and China try to sustain significant international economic activity with Iran. The UAE and Qatar have their own strong economic ties to Iran, and officials around the region are wary of sparking fresh tensions between the few remaining stable governments there. Pompeo tried to justify his case by repeatedly referencing the plight of ordinary people, Iranians themselves, Middle Easterners at risk from Iranian-backed Houthi and Hamas militants, and Syrians suffering because of Iran's support for the brutal Assad regime. In Trump-era style, he both spoke of Syrians as victims and then repeated the misleading populist argument that Syrian refugees flowing into Europe include many terrorists. Yet so far, the effects of Trump's decision are hitting the individuals Pompeo mentioned the hardest, making it more difficult for Iranians to buy vital goods and for U.S. officials to use diplomacy to help the American prisoners held in Iran. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran will likely only grow in the months ahead as hardliners there gain power by pushing the narrative that the West cannot be trusted and the Trump administration continues to try and look tough. Experts who watched Pompeo's speech called his demands unrealistic, and some predicted that when Iran inevitably fails to meet them, the U.S. will use it as justification for military intervention. Pompeo has not outlined a strategy, but rather a grab bag of wishful thinking that can only be interpreted as a call for regime change in Iran, tweeted Suzanne Maloney, a former State Department official during the George W. Bush administration. This article has been updated to include comment from Federica Mogherini.